Dub Nation, I have to be honest with you. The air around the bay feels heavier tonight, like there is a storm sitting over the Chase Center that nobody was ready for, a storm made not of missed shots or bad coaching, but of whispers, leaks, and a word that every fan dreads hearing next to the name of their favorite star, the word that has exploded across timelines and late-night talk shows alike. The word that now surrounds Jackson Blaze like a cloud he cannot outrun, and that word is doping. When I woke up this morning and grabbed my phone, I expected to see the usual mix of highlights, trade rumors, and memes about rival fan bases, but instead my notifications were drowning in shock. Insiders hinting, anonymous sources talking, and one headline after another suggesting that our explosive wing, the heart of so many comeback wins, had allegedly been pulled from team activities after an unexpected result in a routine league test, and instantly it felt like the entire Dub Nation was dropped into a nightmare. You know that feeling when you hear something so surreal that your brain simply refuses to process it at first, like when someone tells you the ocean is suddenly gone or that the sun forgot to rise, and you laugh because it sounds like a bad joke, but then you see the expression on their face and realize they are dead serious. That was exactly how it felt as I scrolled through post after post about Blaze being sidelined while the league reviews some mysterious irregularity in his test results. The first reaction for most fans was denial, plain and simple, because Jackson Blaze is not just another name on the roster. He is the player whose energy drags us back into games that look lost, the guy who dives on the floor for loose balls and pumps his chest at the crowd, the one who talks about culture, discipline, and the privilege of wearing this jersey. And nothing about that image fits with the ugly shadows that the word doping drags behind it. Very quickly, though, denial started turning into questions, and those questions were not gentle ones, because when your franchise star gets linked to something as serious as performance-enhancing substances, even as a rumor, the mind of every fan goes into overdrive, asking what really happened, what the league has actually found, whether there was a mistake, whether some supplement was contaminated, or whether this is all just a twisted misunderstanding blown out of proportion by desperate click hunters. From the team side, the silence has been deafening, and that silence might be the loudest sound of all, because all we have so far is a carefully crafted statement that says Blaze is away from the group because of internal procedures, and that the organization will cooperate fully with the league, a phrase so cold and polished that it feels like it was written by a lawyer staring at a wall, trying not to admit anything while also not denying a single detail. On social media, Dub Nation has split into emotional battalions, with one side ready to defend Blaze to the last breath, insisting that there must be a lab error, a jealous rival, or some twisted administrative confusion, while the other side, burned by so many scandals in the sports world over the years, nervously admits that they have seen too many idols fall to blindly ignore the possibility that something very wrong might have happened this time. What hurts the most is how personal this feels, because Blaze is not some mercenary who just showed up for a paycheck. He is the guy who embraced the city from day one, talked about the Bay like home, shouted out the fans in every post-game interview, and built a connection that felt almost unbreakable, and now we are forced to watch that bond being tested in the most brutal way, under the harshest possible spotlight. Imagine the atmosphere in that locker room right now, the empty stall where Blaze usually sits, the shoes lined up under the bench untouched, the jersey hanging there without its owner, the teammates exchanging glances they do not want to acknowledge, wondering what they should say to the cameras and what they should say to each other when reporters are gone and it is just them and their thoughts echoed by the hum of the ventilation system. You can bet that the coaching staff is walking a tightrope as well, juggling rotations, rewriting game plans, and trying to find a way to keep the group focused while one of their cornerstones is surrounded by a storm of accusations, because no matter how much they repeat the old cliché about taking things day by day, there is no way to pretend this is anything other than a massive shock to the spine of the entire organization. Meanwhile, the league office probably looks like a war room, with investigators, lawyers, and medical experts going over every detail of this test, checking protocols, interviewing people, and trying to decide whether this situation will end as a footnote or explode into a full-blown scandal that could define a chapter of modern basketball history, and you know that every step they take will be carefully leaked, analyzed, and argued over by fans and pundits. Talk shows have already pounced on the story, building dramatic graphics with Blaze's face next to ominous headlines, inviting former players and so-called experts to speculate about the possible length of a suspension, the substance supposedly involved, and what this could mean for the Warriors' chances in a brutally competitive conference, even though the reality is that nobody outside the investigation truly knows what is going on yet. For rival fan bases, of course, this is pure gasoline on the fire of trash talk, and they are flooding timelines with jokes, memes, and cheap shots, because nothing delights some people more than seeing a star from another team stumble, and that is exactly why Dub Nation has to step carefully between defending its own and not falling into the trap of reacting with blind aggression that only feeds the chaos. Every era of basketball has its defining controversies, Those moments when fans remember exactly where they were when they heard the news, and this could very well become one of those memories for Warrior supporters. A moment when the conversation shifted from pure tactics and excitement on the court to uncomfortable questions about what athletes put into their bodies and how far they are willing to go to stay at the top of the game. For the younger fans, the ones who grew up idolizing Blaze's poster above their bed or trying to copy his step-back jumper on outdoor courts until their legs burned, this is more than just a news cycle, it is a blow to the heart, a confrontation with the reality that even the heroes they watch on giant screens are human, fragile, and sometimes capable of making decisions that can haunt them for the rest of their careers. Some people have already started digging through old interviews and press conferences, looking for any hint, any nervous gesture, any offhand comment that might retrospectively seem suspicious, which says more about our obsession with scandal than it does about Blaze himself, because once a rumor like this starts, there is a twisted temptation to rewrite the entire story of a player through the fog of suspicion. At the same time, there are veterans of the fanbase reminding everyone that no official sanction has been announced, that test results can be complicated, that chain of custody can be challenged, that supplements can be mislabeled, and that prematurely burying a player's reputation based on fragments of information is not only unfair but potentially unforgivable if those fragments turn out to be misleading or flat-out wrong. It is impossible to ignore the cold financial side of this either, because Blaze is not just a star on the court, he is a marketing engine, a face on billboards, a name on jerseys sold all over the Bay and far beyond, and every hour that his status remains uncertain is an hour in which sponsors, partners, and the business side of the franchise are calculating risks, rehearsing statements, and wondering how far the Shockwaves might go. On the court, the tactical implications are immediate and brutal, because removing a high-energy scorer and perimeter defender from the equation creates a giant hole in both the offensive flow and the defensive schemes, forcing role players to step into bigger responsibilities, forcing the coach to experiment with lineups that were never meant to be more than emergency solutions, and forcing fans to adjust their expectations on the fly. For Blaze himself, this has to be the longest and darkest stretch of his professional life, locked in a battle not against an opponent he can guard or drive past, but against a process, a bureaucracy, a narrative, and the terrifying possibility that one moment of carelessness or one product he did not fully understand could define how history remembers him more than his clutch shots or his passion for the game. The train of public opinion is brutal once it gets moving, and right now that train is racing through sports media with Blaze's name painted across every car, dragging along speculation about what a suspension would look like, how long it might last, whether the Warriors would consider moving on from him, or whether the organization would stand firmly behind him and ride out the storm no matter how loud the criticism becomes. Inside the fanbase, group chats and comment sections have turned into heated arenas of debate, with some insisting that loyalty means believing in your player until proven otherwise, and others arguing that loyalty to the team as a whole sometimes requires a hard line, even against beloved figures, if the integrity of the game is truly at stake. And that tension is tearing at the seams of what is usually one of the tightest communities in basketball. There is also a deeper, more uncomfortable question lurking beneath all the noise, and it is about how modern sports culture pushes athletes to extremes, demanding that they be faster, stronger, more resilient than ever, while playing more games, doing more travel, and staying in peak condition for longer spans than previous generations, creating a pressure cooker in which the temptation to look for shortcuts can become overwhelmingly strong. Fans are already comparing the situation to past scandals in other sports, recalling how once upon a time certain leagues were flooded with rumors and later confessions about performance-enhancing drugs, and they are asking whether basketball has simply been lucky so far or whether it has quietly been ignoring signs that something similar could be happening under the surface, hidden behind highlight reels and inspirational commercials. Right now, every detail about Blaze's routine is being dissected, from the trainers he works with to the supplements he endorses, to the recovery methods he has praised in interviews, and this intense scrutiny shows how quickly admiration can morph into suspicion when the narrative shifts, how the same routines that were once praised as elite discipline can suddenly become clues in a story of alleged wrongdoing. The franchise is walking a tight line between protecting its player and protecting its brand, which means releasing as little information as possible until the league concludes its investigation, but that cautious strategy comes at a cost, because in the vacuum created by official silence, speculation grows wild and tangled, and every vague phrase in a press release becomes a Rorschach test for anxious fans and opportunistic critics. Meanwhile, training sessions continue, the schedule does not stop, and the rest of the roster has no choice but to lace up, stretch, and prepare for games that will now be treated by the outside world not just as competitions, but as psychological X-rays, with analysts watching every possession to see whether the Warriors look distracted, broken, or surprisingly united in the face of this drama. There is a very real possibility that this could become a rallying point for the team, a moment when leaders in the locker room step up, call for unity, and transform the pain and confusion into a new level of focus, turning every game into a statement that the logo on the front of the jersey is bigger than any individual storm, but that heroic narrative is not guaranteed. It has to be built day after day under immense pressure. For Blaze, the path forward will depend heavily on what the league ultimately announces, but even in the best-case scenario, where some explanation emerges that clears his name or significantly lowers his level of culpability, the stain of this episode will not wash away easily, because there will always be those who believe the worst version of events, those who smirk when his name is mentioned, those who whisper in comment sections. If the outcome is harsher, if the league decides that rules were clearly broken and a serious suspension is justified, then the consequences for the Warriors will be seismic, forcing the front office to re-evaluate its long-term plans, forcing the coaching staff to reimagine the identity of the team, and forcing fans to grapple with the painful reality that one of their brightest stars has fallen in a way that cannot simply be undone by a heartfelt apology. Yet even in the middle of this chaos, there is a reason why so many people are glued to this story, refreshing their feeds, listening to every podcast, watching every emergency livestream, and that reason is simple. The Warriors matter to this fan base in a way that is deeply emotional, almost spiritual, a source of joy and pride that people cling to in a world that often feels overwhelming, and anything that threatens that source of joy hits like a punch to the chest. We are in the age of instant judgment, where clips are cut, quotes are ripped out of context, and narratives are assembled at warp speed by people who have never spoken to the athlete they are condemning, and that is why this moment demands something rare in sports discourse today, a mix of patience, empathy, and critical thinking that resists the urge to treat rumors as verdicts and headlines as final truths. At the same time, fans have every right to ask for transparency, to demand that both the league and the franchise handle the situation with honesty and respect, because doping is not a minor technicality, it goes to the heart of fair competition, and if the rules have been broken, there must be consequences, but those consequences must be built on solid evidence, not on the shaky foundation of leaked phrases and anonymous quotes. If there is a lesson to be learned here, it might be that idol worship comes with risk, because when we build players into flawless icons, we set ourselves up for heartbreak when their humanity shows through, whether in the form of a missed game winner, a controversial comment, or something as serious as an investigation into banned substances, and maybe the healthier approach is to admire their talent while remembering that they, like us, can stumble. As the days go by, every small update will feel huge, every new statement will be dissected like a sacred text, and every game without Blaze will be a reminder of the shadow hanging over the franchise. But in the middle of all that noise, the soul of Dub Nation will be defined by how it chooses to respond. Whether it collapses into toxicity and finger-pointing or rises into a united voice that demands fairness without abandoning compassion. For the younger players on the roster, this situation is a brutal crash course in the realities of professional sports, showing them that being in the spotlight is not just about glory, endorsements, and cheers, but also about scrutiny, responsibility, and the weight of carrying not just their own dreams, but the expectations of millions of fans who latch onto their every move. You can already sense that this situation will be remembered in documentaries and retrospectives someday, framed as either the scandal that derailed a potential dynasty or as the crisis that forged a new era of resilience, depending entirely on how the story unfolds from this point onward. Which is exactly why so many of us Warrior fans feel like we are living inside the first chapters of a saga that has not yet revealed whether it will end in redemption or regret. Until there is clarity, rumors will keep trying to write the ending for us, but as fans, we have the power to resist letting those rumors define our relationship to this team, to hold on to the memories of Blaze's hustle, his fire, his chemistry with the crowd, while still acknowledging the seriousness of the investigation and accepting that if lines were crossed, accountability is part of loving the game honestly. Right now, the Chase Center is still there, standing tall above the water, the court lines have not moved, the banners still hang from the rafters, and the ball will keep bouncing, no matter what conclusions the league eventually releases, because the story of the Warriors has always been bigger than any individual chapter, even one as dramatic and painful as this. If you close your eyes for a moment, you can almost hear a future roar from the crowd, a night when this whole saga feels like a distant wound that is scarred over, a night when the team, whoever is on the floor by then, plays with a fire that feels like a direct answer to the doubts and jokes that rained down on them during this period, and that vision is part of what keeps Dub Nation steady even as the ground trembles. In the meantime, all we can do is watch, wait, and keep our hearts open to the complexity of the situation, remembering that behind the headlines is a human being whose career and reputation are hanging by a thread, behind the press releases is an organization grappling with enormous pressure, and behind every heated argument in the comments is a fan who loves this team so much that the very idea of betrayal or injustice hits like a personal attack. This is not the story any of us wanted to be talking about right now, not when we could be obsessing over pick-and-roll coverages, bench depth, or playoff seeding, but sports, like life, rarely give us the luxury of choosing which battles we face, And so here we are, Warrior fans, staring into the eye of a scandal, trying to balance passion with fairness, loyalty with integrity, hope with realism. Whatever comes next, one thing is clear. The bond between this franchise and its fans will be tested in a way that goes beyond wins and losses, beyond three-pointers and highlight dunks, and how we come through this together will say as much about Dub Nation as it does about any player, coach, or executive, because in the end, the true strength of a fan base is revealed not in the easy nights of celebration, but in the hard nights when everything feels uncertain and the only thing we can hold onto is each other. Before we dive into the next update, help us keep the Warriors' spirit alive by subscribing to the channel and smashing that like button. Stay connected with all the latest Golden State Warriors news. Now, let's get into it.